Hello and welcome everybody to this month's edition of The Wellness Policy. My name is Wai Ting. Very happy to be back here for the month of May. And joined with me as always are my co-hosts here on The Wellness Policy, Goodman and Neal Flanagan. How are you guys doing?
Yes. Hello. We're well. I'm not going to speak on behalf of Neal, by the way. How rude of me. How are you doing, Neal?
You are one of the same people. I've come to realize. So close enough.
I'm doing okay. I've been trying to grow a beard for the last couple of weeks, and it's making me feel old because it used to come out kind of slightly salt and pepper, and now it's way more salt and pepper, lots and lots of silver in there. So that's I'm trimming that.
What was the decision behind the growth, the beard?
Beards are cool these days.
Okay.
Speak for yourself.
Well, what's that in your face?
It's a bunch of shit painted. It's so that's weeks, Neal?
That's a couple of weeks, yeah.
Wow. Look at you. So do you clean it up? Is it just like that is have you touched it up in any kind of way?
You can see that I haven't around the cheeks and so on. That would have been step 2, but instead I'm going to nuke it. And, well, not nuke it because I hate being completely clean shaven. So I just use a trimmer on it. This is fascinating for the audience.
Do you have a desired length that you're aiming for?
But well, I was going to see how it looked growing into a full beard, but I'm not liking the amount of grey, so I'm going down to about 3 millimeters on the trimmer.
Would you ever dye your beard?
No.
No.
I love
Can you imagine the hassle?
Step too far. Okay. Well,
Step too far, yeah. Especially when I'm not exactly blessed with a huge amount of hair on top either, so it might look a bit weird, sort of. So.
I think it would look good. I think you would look good either way. So
before shopping looks for my trip to Toronto, you see.
I look forward to getting the in-person update when Neal comes into town next month. But
before we move on, sorry, Wai. I noticed this last night. Is this a new shirt though?
This is a Hana Kimura shirt.
Ah, very nice.
Yes, of course. On the anniversary of her unfortunate passing. But I don't own many like bright yellow shirts, and I don't really have much excuse to wear most of them until a day like this. Unfortunately, of course. But yeah, it's my Hana Kimura shirt.
Love it. Looks good on you. I always just wondered like how much thought you put into how you physically present on these shows because you stream so often.
I would say very little. Like I think I go through like a wardrobe of like 6 shirts. Like if you cycle through the shows throughout a week, you'll notice I'm pretty much like on one like wash a week, and I'm just cycling through everything. So
we
you
noticed.
were rocking a plaid shirt the other day. Well, I forget what show, but
I didn't think anyone would pay such close attention. But
it's the most interesting thing.
Okay, I'm imagining like a whole side chat dedicated to like my fashion choices, but I think we wasted enough of our guest time here because it's not just the 3 of us here to talk about beards nor about plaid shirts. We are here to talk about the topic of children's mental health, and very pleasured to welcome special guest on this particular edition, an author and mental health advocate here, Chris Duke. Chris Duke, welcome to The Wellness Policy.
Hey guys, how are you doing?
Good to be with you, Chris.
For people who aren't watching this stream, and you should at youtube.com/postwrestling, Chris has quite the collection of world heavyweight championship titles, some intercontinental thrown in there as well, but quite the selection in his background here.
I was a massive belt collector before COVID, and I had all the belts, including a custom-made AEW belt. But unfortunately, when COVID came around and I wasn't able to work as much, I sold all my belts just to try and get some money. So my good friend loaned me these belts, so my office could still look pretty cool without me having to spend a fortune to get it back.
Awesome.
They do look great on the wall, Like, I mean, I'm sure they look great like wearing them as well, but I love the way they look on a wall. Really.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Chris, we're not just here to talk to you about your belt collection or your friend's belt collection. We're here to talk about the topic of children's mental health, and the reason why I think you are a great guest for this particular topic is because you happen to be an author who has authored several books about children's mental health, including Lucy's Blue Day. You see your custom-made Lucy's Blue Day World Championship next to you. But maybe first of all, let's kind of lead with that. Talk to us about how you got involved in sort of like this topic and what made you decide to write a book about children's mental health.
Sure, it was purely by accident actually that this all came about. It was so about 5 years ago, actually 5 years ago, almost to the day, I was sitting on my daughter's bed, and she was 7 years old at the time, and I was just helping her get to sleep. You know, as some parents do, they sit in with their children when they go to sleep. But so I was helping her get to sleep, and she was having a bit of a day, and she said, "Daddy, do you ever not like being you?" And it really, really hit me because I knew exactly what she meant. Even at 7 years old, I knew that, like when I was 7, I remember feeling like that. I remember feeling that I didn't like being me. I didn't like being myself. And I thought, I don't want my little girl to grow up having the same kind of issues that I grew up with. Because obviously, and I'm sure you guys would be the same, that we weren't encouraged to talk about our feelings when we were little. I wanted to change that just to help my little girl. So I pulled out my phone and I wrote this little poem about a little girl whose hair changes color when she feels different emotions. And I just left it at that. And then my wife suggested that we get it illustrated so we could turn it into a book. Again, purely for my kid, nobody else, just my little girl. Unfortunately, illustrators cost a lot of money, and one thing that I don't have is a lot of money. So we crowdfunded, and that's when we realized that we had something special here. Because before we knew it, we'd raised the money to pay the illustrator, and then some. The book came out. We self-published the book. It came out on it. We brought it out, and within days of the book coming out, I had emails from schools asking me, "Chris, do you want to come and do talks in schools?" So since then, I have been visiting schools almost religiously until COVID. So 3 schools a day, 5 days a week, all over the UK, just doing the mental health talks.
So this,
this is a book here.
It's an incredibly sweet story. I mean, the idea that your daughter just asked you this sort of like, I mean, rather innocent question, but I mean, what a loaded question as well, right? And the fact that happened to inspire you to not just write something, but to your wife, taking it further and actually spreading this to the world, and even beyond that, taking that one step further and like interacting with people, going to schools and trying to make a difference that way. That is a very, commendable, certainly.
Thank you.
Did you always have you always thought about this topic? Had you done any sort of like meaningful sort of studying of this, or was this just something that you've kind of like developed from the heart through your own experiences, or what? How did you? Yeah.
Life experience. That is exactly it. It's pure life experience. I have no qualifications. I'll put that out there just now. My highest qualification is an advanced higher in music. I don't know what that is over the water, but it's it's like the highest qualification you can get at school. I didn't go to college or anything like that. That's another story for another day. But so everything was just lived experience that I have done. Just for context, if you can hear that noise in the background, I've got 2 dogs play fighting at the moment in their crate, which is just over there, and they've now decided now's the time to wake up. So yeah, Hello. It was all lived experience. Everything that I've been through is all. I look back and I see that I wasn't encouraged to talk about my feelings, and because I kept all my feelings bottled up, that led to more issues as I grew up, with things like self-sabotage, self-harm at one point, overeating, addiction, all this stuff came for me from the fact that I wasn't encouraged to let my feelings out when I was younger. and I just want to help other kids know that it's okay. You know, no matter what your feelings are, it is absolutely okay.
So, Chris, at what point did you experience some sort of permission to be more verbally expressive?
Good. That's a great question. I think it was more around about the time that I wrote the poem, even before it was a book. And I started. No, take that back. I'm actually going to go further back than that. When my eldest was born, I was hit with a pretty serious case of postnatal depression. And you know, I was miserable. I didn't have that instant rush of love that you get when you meet your child for the first time, and it wasn't very common in men. So when the midwife came to my wife to ask her all the postnatal questions, or the postnatal questionnaire, when my wife was answering no to all these questions, I was in the corner of the room answering yes to them all, you know, quietly. And I kept it to myself. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't seek help, and it caused a lot of problems. It caused a lot of problems in my marriage. It caused a lot of problems with my relationships. I ended up losing my job because of it, because I was so pent up and so quiet about it. Eventually, I did go to the doctor, and I had a very supportive GP who seen my symptoms right away and said, "You have got postnatal depression." And from that moment on, it was like, you know, talking about the fact that I had postnatal depression saved my life, saved my marriage, and saved my family.
Wow.
So I'm just kind of taken back to, you know, like the recent birth of my child, and my wife certainly experienced some postnatal depression. I don't know if that's the term that we use over here, but I mean it describes, you know, something very similar.
Yeah.
Now for women, I think it's understood to be like somewhat hormonal. Just, you know, due to the whole biological process of giving birth to a child, and maybe that's why there's so much more attention, you know, focused on obviously the person who delivers the baby than there is for the male. Can you talk a little bit about, like, you know, what exactly postnatal depression is in men, and how somebody might be able to identify whether or not they're going through something like that?
So I think it's different, and every case is different. And this is purely based on my opinion and what I've been through. My wife and I were actually having a conversation last night about this, and I came up with this phrase that seems to encompass the entire thing. So when my wife was giving birth to my daughter, I was watching the person I love the most in the world create the person that I love most in the world. And that is just something that you cannot comprehend, because you've got all this love that you give to one person, and then all of a sudden you need to almost share that love. And you might not, in your head, might not have enough love to go around. And then, of course, there's the expectations of being a father, because I mean, I certainly know, like my dad, I love my dad, and there's a lot of different stories that I'll tell you throughout this, and my dad is quite relevant in it. But my dad was and is an excellent dad. He was very, very supportive, very hardworking. You know, he would work more than I would see him, you know, and he would work hard to provide for his family. And I felt that pressure to be that provider. And because I wasn't providing, because I got hit with this depression, that just made it worse, because I felt as a failure as a dad, because I wasn't being a provider. I wasn't going out and working. I wasn't supporting my wife, because I was the one that was miserable.
Understood. And the fact that it was your child that kind of helped you. I mean, I'm sure, you know, with therapy as well, but like the fact that your child was such a big part of maybe getting you to step out of, you know, whatever you were going through, I think is a wonderful sort of like conclusion, or at least a partial, you know, advancement of that particular story.
I hadn't even considered that, to be honest. That's quite beautiful.
The topic of children's mental health is one that I very much like am not educated on, because partially because I think I've not been taught through my own upbringing. It seems relatively new, at least for schools to even talk about a topic like this. What age do we start paying attention to the mental health of children?
Oh my goodness. This is a trigger for me because I think that it's right away. Even when children can't really think for themselves, I still think it is right away. Do you ever watch TV shows where there are children or even baby actors that are crying, for example? And I mean, these children aren't acting. These children are actually crying, and that upsets me. That it hits me right in here because they're not acting. They are being made to cry or however it's happening. And I don't like that. It just really upsets me, which is why I think we should be paying attention to it almost right away. And I'm not talking about the fact that a 1-year-old should be sitting talking about their feelings, but we just need to be aware that okay, kid's pretty happy just now. That's good. Let's focus on that. Let's keep it going. Why are they upset? And then as they get older, talking about how they feel mentally will come just as naturally as talking about how they feel physically. So when I go into schools, one of the questions that I always ask is when I'm doing an assembly in front of, let's say, 300 school children, and I'll say, right, put your hand up if you've ever had a cold. And they'll all put their hand up. And I say, right, you wake up in the morning time and you feel a cold coming on. What's the first thing you do? They'll say, tell a grown-up, tell your parents or your guardian. Okay, so you wake up in the morning and you're feeling a bit unwell in your head, feeling a bit sad, a bit down. What do? And that's when the light switches on. Should tell a grown-up, should tell a parent. So it's just trying to get the children to be as natural as talking about your physical health.
Normalizing just talking about your feelings. Yeah. I'm curious, Jordan or Neil, throughout your own upbringings, how much encouragement have either of you had to maybe enter this sort of discussion?
A good amount. I first met with a mental health provider. I was maybe in 4th grade, so I was like 9 years old, perhaps. I have Tourette's syndrome. It's motor tics, meaning just physical movements, and it's incredibly mild, even more so now into adulthood. But from memory, that was the first time I met with a mental health provider of some sort. And throughout life, dealt with issues related to mostly to anxiety. So my mom especially, but both my parents, they normalized mental health treatment. They normalized talking about these intrapsychic experiences. And, no wonder I'm a licensed mental health clinician as an adult, just because this stuff was incredibly normalized at a young age. Just to touch on the conversation about when do we start taking children's mental health into account, even pregnancy, I would argue. I mean, if substances are going into the body that are not good for a fetus, I mean, that can significantly affect a child's development, and what we consider to be within the scope of mental health, whether that's cognitive functioning, emotional health, social skills, and things like that. And when we're talking about children's mental health, the term that comes to mind immediately in this field is attachment. So yes, we can't expect a 3-month-old to verbalize their emotional experience, but we can create relationships of safety and security that have a massive impact, perhaps even well into adulthood, on a child's development as it relates to mental and emotional well-being.
How about you, Neil?
My experience is somewhere in between, I guess, in the sense that I feel like for someone my age, my parents were reasonably liberal minded and open to, talking about feelings and stuff, but more so my mum than my dad. I think that dad was a great provider, a very good father, but possibly Chris will relate to this in the sort of Celtic Scots or Irish tradition, a bit stoic, about his own feelings and maybe not wanting to. I didn't feel particularly that when I was growing up that he was the parent to go to chat about how I was feeling. That was more my mum's role, I felt. That has changed in later life, all for the good. I think that attitudes do alter across all age groups. But I certainly felt permission, and sometimes then my mum would relay what I had said to my dad, and then the three of us would sit down and talk about whatever I had brought up.
I can speak like from my experience. I feel like I had a relatively different experience from almost all you guys were. I mean, maybe it's partially because I have a pretty large age gap with my parents. I think we're something like, I want to say like 40 years apart. That plus I think culturally, meant these sort of things just aren't necessarily discussed in the Chinese community. So I don't feel like I really had much of that sort of encouragement at all throughout my life. And if I learned any of it, I mean, I probably picked it up from watching like modern media, and learning life lessons through television, for instance. I'd never really had these sort of conversations with my parents. Honestly, like maybe there's a bit of a language barrier too. That probably would prevent things quite a bit as well. So I really wish there were these sort of resources and that parents especially were aware as they interact with their children.
When you say modern media, are you talking more like Full House or WCW Nitro?
A little bit of both. Plenty of life lessons to take as well. I'm sure from mid '90s WCW Nitro. Yeah,
certainly.
Yeah, but Chris, what are some of these topics that you might introduce as you're doing these sort of school sessions? Because I imagine maybe a lot of these children are completely new to the topic as well.
Yeah, and that is the whole point of the story, being the fact that Lucy, her way of expressing her emotions is through the color of her hair. So, as I'd mentioned, her hair goes red when she feels angry. Her hair goes green when she feels jealous. Her hair goes purple when she's excited, and then one day she wakes up and her hair's blue, and she doesn't understand why. And then she later on meets someone else who's got blue hair. Spoiler alert. And she learns that it's okay to have a blue day. And it's finding that resource that a child can use to express their feelings. Because I've come across children that are non-verbal who have started to use color to express how they're feeling, and that is why I wanted to focus on that as well, because it is difficult to express how you're feeling even as an adult sometimes. And that's so color is one of the major points, and also why we feel what we feel. So, because one of the very first questions I asked the children is, what sort of things make you angry? What sort of things make you jealous or sad? And for the most part, they are, they're children, so it's quite trivial. Like if someone steals my sweets or someone doesn't play with me or whatever. But sometimes there are some real heart pullers. I think is maybe the word to use. And even now, even 5 years later, they still get me sometimes. But it's just trying to honestly. The simple key to this, and I use this, it's like a superpower, is just knowing that it's okay. If you feel it, it is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's why I said earlier about the fact that if you've had a cold, because everybody's had a cold, the reason that we've all had a cold is because we're human and we're supposed to feel that. So there is absolutely no difference from having a cold than feeling sad or feeling angry or jealous, because it's okay. You're human, and that is the kind of basis of the whole thing. Is just that's how I got through everything at the end, is because I eventually accepted it's okay. I didn't fight for happiness. I just fought for acceptance and just accept. Yeah, it's okay.
I think it's kind of amazing how, like, I mean, a lot of the messaging that you're describing that you're using for children is similar to the messaging that I feel like adults are very much in need of, and it's very exactly similar, you know, just these same lessons of like, hey, it's okay to feel, and it's okay to you know, be whoever you are. Like, they're so simple sounding, but they're also things that I think adults could really use reminders of all the time.
I think most wisdom is simple at its core.
Yeah.
I mean, Chris, you're literally giving other people permission to be human. That's powerful. I'm curious because as a mental health professional and someone that engages groups or audiences of people often through drumming or rhythm-based exercises as my way to bring up conversations or help people embody these types of ideas related to well-being and community. When you were first invited to share at a school, I've done that many times, typically in a classroom setting, but a few times in more of like an assembly setting where there's a couple hundred kids. How did you first conceptualize the delivery of your content? And did you already have a skill set in public communication or presentation, or especially with many kids at once? This is hard stuff. So I'm just wondering how you approached it.
One thing that you'll find out about me at some point probably is that I am a term that I don't know if you use over there. Neil, you might know this term. I'm a blagger. You know, I will blag my way through anything. So when I was first invited to the very first school that I went to, which was my daughter's school, I should say, I had no plan of what I was going to talk about. I walked into that school, one, knowing that I was going to read the book, and two, we were going to talk about the book, and that was it. And I completely blagged my way through it that first time. But I took the things that hit well and I continued that through to the next assembly. And then when that stuff hit well and the things that I added on, I took that to the next one. And I think now, almost 5 years on, I think I've eventually perfected it. Well, sort of. But yeah, it was initially for me, it was a total blag getting through that. But now, and I also think it's because as an adult male, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you know, generally adult males are quite immature. You know, so if I'm getting into schools and talking to children, I can talk to them at their level because it's how we can talk. We're quite immature. You know, if I feel a fart joke coming on, then I'll just say it. I won't, you know, because it's children. It's fine.
Yeah. And I think maybe also you're underselling, like Chris, because having had a quick look at your sort of resume, you know, you do have communication skills through previous jobs. You've worked in community radio and then local radio and so on, so you know how to present.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I did do some radio before. Radio was like my big passion, and actually before radio, I did actually have a quite successful wrestling podcast before, but that was inspired by John and Wai. Let me just put that out there. They started doing it, and I thought, oh, you know what, I could do that. And but we ended up putting that to the side, and I went and pursued my radio career. But yeah, I did.
Sorry, is that still Chris? Is that still available on podcast apps? And would you like to point us in that direction?
No, it's not. It's a bit of a dark time that when the podcast kind of went away. But so I don't think any of it's still out there, to be honest.
So outside of Lucy's Blue Day, you've also continued the series of books here, and one of the books I wanted to ask you about is Archie Unplugs the Internet. This is a topic that has often kind of come up, is just the effect of social media, the effect of simply spending so much time on our phones on us as adults. I'm very curious to know what you've learned about how children deal with it. I know the book more so kind of deals with adults using phones around children, but I'm very curious to know what inspired you to write this particular edition and what you've learned about the topic.
Do you know, the story actually came from a dream that I had, where it was a friend of mine had explained to me once that back in the 90s or whatever, your telecommunications was very, very fragile, and the communication line between the UK and the Americas was basically just one cable going straight through the Atlantic. And I thought that how fragile that was. And then I had a dream that very same night that I was swimming through the Atlantic and my foot got caught on this cable and it just blacked out the entire world from the internet. And so that's how the story came about. It was just, Archie finds this giant plug in his garden and doesn't know what it does. So he unplugs it. And it turns out that that plug is the source of the entire world's internet. And he's got the control on whether or not he wants to put it back on. Because once the internet's out, he realizes that his relationships with his parents, with his family, with his friends is a lot better. And people are talking to him. People are being friendly to each other. And the president of the world, Ronald Shrimp, is no longer on the internet harassing people.
Ronald Shrimp. Okay.
Who could that be based on?
Yeah. It sounds lovely. I believe you do like a reading of it on your YouTube channel, which we'll link to in our show descriptions as well. But why was this topic important to you?
I've got my head on my phone quite a lot, around the kids, or I did before, and I realized I was missing out on so much just because I was constantly, either on my phone or on my computer or, constantly in this digital world that I've even got in front of me right now. And yeah, I missed out on so much with my kids because I mean, my kids are awesome, right? And generally, and if you've got kids, you'll know this yourself. Your own kids are always they're the best. And I found myself at one point in my life where I was sitting and my middle child, Summer, would say, "Daddy, watch this. Daddy, watch this. Daddy, watch this." And I'd be like this. I'd be like, "Yeah, honey, yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's brilliant. Yeah, brilliant." And realize that I completely missed, her first step into gymnastics, which now she is absolutely amazing at. And so we learned pretty quickly that putting down our devices is just as important as sitting and having a conversation with each other. We have a rule here in this house where we don't have any phones at the dinner table, and every single night when dinner is ready, we sit at the table and we have a conversation and we talk about our day. My oldest is now 12, coming on 13, and she's a bit too cool to talk to us now, so we don't get much out of her. But that's where it came from. Is just, again, personal experience. I was missing out on stuff, and I wanted to spread that message that this little device, even though it controls a lot of your life, it's not the be all and end all. Put it down. Have a look outside. There's a lot more. This is how we coped before the internet. There was thousands and thousands of years of humans before the internet. We coped once. Can we cope again?
Mm-hmm. Another book that I believe you've just recently released is about the pandemic, and it's a book called Lucy's in Lockdown. what has the pandemic and just spending a year away from each other, what sort of effects have that had on your own children, and what have you learned about the topic for children at large, and what basically inspired you to write this one?
The pandemic was rough. It was rough for everybody. Everybody had their own journey through the pandemic, as did we. Now, the Lucy's in Lockdown book, which it was a very short story, but it was more so. I released it just to let the children know, the community that we'd already created through Lucy's Blue Day, just to let them know that Lucy, their friend, was also going through this as well. And again, that they were not alone. All these feelings that they have at the moment, all this confusion, not understanding what was going on, the fact that at that point the reliance on technology as well was. Everybody was going through that, and I wanted to convey that through the character that the children knew when the pandemic first hit. We released that book. That book was an ebook that we released for free, just so the children could get access to it whilst the pandemic was rife.
Can I ask you, Chris, because I'll need to be clear that I'm not a parent, so I don't have too many kids' books around the place, but I remember the sort of cultural moment for this book, because you've got big endorsements. If you visit the website, for our North American listeners, Lorraine Kelly is the undisputed queen of morning television in the UK and Ireland, and has been for decades. And I know that you and her have a friendship at this point, and because you did a podcast with her and so on, and she narrates an animated version of the story, which is tremendous. Stephen Fry and some other big hitters. So I was wondering, part of your efforts with the book was clearly touring around schools all over the country. And you didn't just stick to Scotland. Even you were England, Wales. I think you came over to Belfast. Am I right?
I did. I was in Belfast for a while as well.
So I wondered the effect, because this isn't just be careful how I phrase it, but it's not just a charitable endeavor. It's also a commercial one. So to some degree, the pandemic must have had an effect on your efforts as well. And I just wondered how you personally got through all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't deny that Lucy's Blue Day was and is my income as well. This is my business.
Yeah.
I say business. It is a charitable cause, and I do get a salary from it, so it pays my bills.
Sure.
But so to give you a bit of context here, I grew up in the East End of Glasgow, which was a pretty not an affluent area of the world. So I grew up struggling for money and struggling generally in life, and even as an adult, we struggled quite a lot and lived paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, and even sometimes not even that. And then when the book took off, things started to change, and our life started to change a little bit as well. Again, and this wasn't just purely financial. It was the fact that I actually had something, in my eyes, something to live for, something to go out and do and be passionate about, and a reason, a why to get out there and do what I do. And then all of a sudden, that all just ground to a halt. Like it was just done. So the Friday before our first lockdown, I was in London. I was visiting schools in London. I was sitting in a theater watching Hamilton, the musical, which I don't know, best musical I've ever seen in my life. Let's just put that out there. And then 2 days later, I was in my house, not knowing what was going to happen next. So that's what I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, that, I had to sell my belts, just to survive. And just to pay the bills. And it ended up getting to a point, around about halfway through the pandemic, where we decided we're going to have to close it down. We couldn't afford to keep it going financially. I couldn't afford to keep it going mentally, because every single day was a challenge just to get up and try and survive. So we eventually ended up just having to close it down completely. And when something like that comes along that changes your life and changes your family's life to such an extent, and then it just gets taken away again, it was a very why me type situation. But then eventually, because I actually had to get therapy through that as well, eventually I accepted that if everybody had a why me moment throughout the pandemic. You know, my story was I lost my business. Other people's stories, you know, were different as well, but everybody had a why me moment. Everybody was going through the same journey, which then circles me right back to bringing Lucy's and Lockdown out, because everybody was going through that exact same journey.
Yeah, I should just say for context for the American and Canadian audience that in the UK, schools, all schooling is a national decision. Schools just closed. All schooling was done remotely for a very long period. So I guess that just took away your opportunity to do anything. With,
I did try and do remote assemblies, but it wasn't the same, and the kids didn't get the same benefit from it. And if I'm honest, I didn't get the benefit from it either, because I couldn't see the children looking back at me and know what they were, know how they were reacting and stuff.
Chris, as you're engaging with these kids in person, I'm wondering what kind of feedback are you getting? Are they asking questions? Are they sharing what's resonating most with them? What captures their imagination or curiosity? What have you noticed in a general sense? How this is resonating with these kids, and what are they curious about?
So part of my story, and you, whoever wrote the blurb for this show actually mentioned it earlier, is the fact that I had a wrestling match at one point in my life. Now, I am by no means ever going to say, I would even call it a wrestling match, okay? I one match, that was it. So I tell that story as part of my assembly as well, through it. Oh God, there it is. I look great in spandex, don't I? Oh, that's totally distracted me. What was I saying? Yeah, so I had this match, and I tell the kids about that, and I tell the kids about the fact that I had 4 dreams when I was a child. I wanted to be a dad, I wanted to be an author, I wanted to be a radio DJ, and I wanted to be a wrestler. And at the end of the whole story is I managed to achieve all my dreams, because I did radio, dad, author, and I had my wrestling match, that one match. And the takeaway from that is throughout all of those, I did struggle. I did have barriers, but I didn't give up. So when I first became a dad and I got hit with the postnatal depression, that's not language I use with the children, but that's, I'll use it here. I could have left. I could have, done something else incredibly stupid, but I didn't. I stuck around and I got the help I needed. And now I've got a very confident and happy family. When I wanted to be a radio DJ, I literally phoned that radio station every single day for a year before they even considered letting me through the door for a job interview. But I didn't give up. When I wanted to be a wrestler, and at that point in my life, I weighed 25 stone, which I believe is it's like 350 pounds or something. I can't do the conversion, but I was very overweight. I was very unhealthy. But I worked hard, I trained hard, I ate right, and I didn't give up. And with the stories on my computer, I've got hundreds of stories on my computer that I've given up on and that I've never finished. But the one story that I didn't give up on is Lucy's Blue Day, and that's the one that became a success. So at the end of the whole assembly, I make a promise to the children, and it's just, I promise you that no matter what it is you want to achieve in your life, no matter how ridiculous it might seem, I promise you that you will do it as long as you don't give up. Come and find me in 20 years and tell me whether you've done it or not. And if you haven't done it, I'll ask you a question, and that question will be, have you given up? And it's up to you what your answer is. So that's the main point of feedback is the inspiration that they get from the kind of not give up part of the assembly, and it's because I use wrestling to bring it all back as a catalyst to that.
Beautiful.
Can you talk a little bit about this entire journey? So if you go on the Lucy's Blue Day YouTube, you can see a little compilation of just your entire journey going on to this television show and basically making the promise, calling your shot that you are going to try to become a professional wrestler. And in the process, you lost an incredible amount of weight, and they documented this entire thing on this TV show. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how your love of professional wrestling has kind of helped you achieve these goals?
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, the wrestling, I mean, you just look at me and you can see that I'm wrestling daft. You know, I've got my belts behind me. I've got my own custom made belt. I've been listening to John and Wai for 20 years. You know, I've been, I'm in when it comes to wrestling. And I first seen a post on social media saying, does anybody want to become a wrestler for an ITV show or for a television show? And I thought, well, you know what? This is a good excuse for me to lose weight, because at this point in my life, I was 25 stone. I was miserable. And I thought, if I can go on TV and say, I want to lose weight and train to be a wrestler at the same time, then that is a good excuse and something that I can't really back out of. So initially, we went to London and we filmed this scene that you're seeing in front of you just now. And the one thing that always stands out to me when I look at this is the fact that I am not happy in that iteration of me. You can see in my eyes that I'm just miserable. I'm sad. And I go and I talk to Davina, and I talk about the fact that I've got the kids and I want to be around for my kids. And that was my motivation for my entire life, is just being there for my kids. So I had the chat, then I went away and I started training. And this is where I thought, oh my goodness, I am in way over my head here. You know, I had a year to train to do this wrestling match. A year was not enough. Not even a little bit. They don't tell you this in the TV show, but I broke my wrist, I dislocated my shoulder, and I lost 3 teeth while I was training for that match. But it was brilliant. It was
what age were you, if you don't mind asking? When you were training?
So I am 39 now. So 33, 32, 33. So it was about 6 or 7 years ago.
How'd you go about finding a place to train you? And were they understanding of your particular goals as it related to performing?
Yeah, so I was very lucky in that sense, because I had actually started working, but I was a ring announcer for a long time for the wrestling company in my local area here, and before that I was actually the original ring announcer for ICW in Glasgow.
Oh wow.
You know, back when they were performing in front of 30 to 50 people, so that's, you know, way back. So I had an in, so to speak, with the local kind of wrestling folk. And so there was a wrestling school 20 minutes drive from my house, and they accepted me in with open arms because they knew that they were going to get national TV exposure out of this. Yeah. So it was win-win for everybody. I got to train, and they got the national exposure that any local wrestling show would want.
Would you mind describing the experience of your first back bump? I trained and performed for some reason when I was 13 years old. There was a legitimate opportunity to do that. When I took my first flat back bump, it knocked the breath out of me. Like, it was so intimidating. Eventually you get used to it and it just becomes a thing you do. One of my friends, he was about my age, presented as much bigger and tougher. He was in tears after his first bump. You're falling on wood quite literally. What was your experience, especially at that age, and in your physical condition? And I'm wondering then, after taking that first bump, maybe how that changed your attitude toward jumping fully into this journey.
Exactly the same as you. First of all, it took my breath away. I thought I was going to die, because I wasn't in any physical condition to be taking bumps at that point in my life anyway. But even before I took that first bump, I was in that crouch position with my hands out like this, ready to go back. I was in that position for about 45 minutes before I had the guts to eventually throw myself back, because I just couldn't do it. I was so scared. First time I did it, yeah, it hurt. It took my breath away. I think I jarred my neck a bit as well, because I didn't tuck my chin, like you're supposed to. Even now, after I had that one match, I wouldn't do it again. I mean, I respect them so much for what they do, because they do it every day, and it seems like second nature to them. It's like almost natural for them to do that. It is the most unnatural thing in the world to throw yourself onto the ground. And for them to do that is just, it's brilliant. I am much happier on this side, watching it on TV or listening to the podcast on a Tuesday morning. I'm much happier here. Although I'm quite happy. I'm quite glad to say that I did it once at least.
So did you have a target goal of like how much, weight you wanted to lose, or was it simply, I'm going to do this for a year and I'm going to have the match?
Well, if I'm being honest with you, after I lost the weight and I had the match, I was trolled quite badly online after it. And like a lot of it was, I try to think of the right one. It was rightly placed, because I was a ring announcer who just wanted to go in and do this wrestling. Now, you guys know, I know as well, some wrestling fans, particularly on Twitter, can be, not the nicest people in the world. And I couldn't ignore it. So if I seen that someone was talking about me, I had to read that entire thread. It was just one of those things, and they were a lot of people were really, really not nice to me. So after I'd lost all that weight and I had that match, I went back into quite a serious depression, and I put on even more weight than I was even at the beginning of that. But it was the birth of my third child, Erica, that kind of made me get my backside in gear and eventually get to where I am now, which I think. So I'm 13 and a half stone. I don't know what that is in pounds, but it's obviously it's a lot lighter than what I was. And this is where I am. I'm happy here. This is, I'm comfortable where I am. I'm a lot more comfortable in myself. If someone's talking about me on Twitter, I don't give a shit. It's this is just, it's how it is. But so the goal after the match was to work hard and try and earn my brownie points and earn my stripes and maybe wrestle some more. But after the reaction that I got online, I decided not to do it again, for my own benefit and for my own mental health.
Sorry to hear that, but man,
but it speaks to your love of wrestling, that you're still a huge fan of wrestling as a pastime, as that negative, very negative experience didn't put you off it as a form of entertainment that you love.
It put me off a long time being a public wrestling fan. Now, obviously, I'm quite. I say I'm a public figure. I'm not a major public figure, but being, a children's author, and the fact that I'm out there all the time and my face is out there all the time, being a public wrestling fan, I was a closet wrestling fan for a long time after that happened. I sat back. I didn't voice my opinions. I didn't tweet anybody. I didn't do any of that. I didn't, and I wasn't active in any of the forums, nothing. It took me a long time to get back to being a an out there wrestling fan, being involved in, like the post forums and, putting my name back out there again. But a community like the post community has shown me that, not all wrestling fans are arseholes. And it's guys like you that have done that. And I just want to just kind of bring that round a wee bit of a full circle here, because the reason that I'm here on this is when we initially started a conversation with Wai, and the fact that he was I think it was the Royal Rumble, I first reached out to you when you said that you were crying when Sami Zayn hit Roman with the with the chair. You would never hear a wrestling podcaster say that in my day. Even a couple of years ago, you would never hear that. But the fact that you were so open about it it made me feel so comfortable being a wrestling fan again. And it was people like you that kind of brought me back out, I guess, is the way I would put it.
Well, listen, I'm a guy who cries at movies. I'm not really ashamed about it, and sometimes that happens with professional wrestling as well. And listen, like the fact that we're all even maybe into as wrestling as much as we are, I imagine we all have quite the emotional connection to it. And I think it's one of the greatest art forms in the entire world, that can move you to tears. And that to me is just more like a sign of our fandom than anything. So thank you very much for saying that. I'm just going back to the whole trolling thing. I'm not shocked, but I kind of am, because I see the story that you've had, and I can't imagine there's anything anybody could tease you for it. Like, it's one of the greatest achievements I think somebody could go through, putting themselves on TV like that, achieving that goal, achieving a life goal of having a wrestling match and having it filmed for a national audience. That to me is insane. And you did it, and the fact that somebody could somehow make fun of something like that, I mean, that's just ridiculous. And it makes you question, well, what exactly are they going through to have to take somebody down for achieving something great?
I agree in a sense. The way I look at it now is that I'm past it. It's a part of my history, and these people that said these things about me, yet they might have been angry, at the time, but chances are, a day after they pressed post on that tweet, they've completely forgotten about it, and they've moved on with their life. This is 7 years on, and I'm still talking about the fact that they said that I looked like a potato in spandex. It's just, it was quite funny, but it hurt at the time. But it is what it is. It happened, and again, let's take it full circle and say, it made me feel sad, it made me feel down, but it's okay. That's how it is.
Yeah. Chris, have you considered integrating wrestling into your authorship?
I would love to. I just don't know what I could write about. I could write about the fact that I could maybe have my match or whatever. I did consider writing a children's book about wrestling, but again, it's where that story would come from. Inspiration comes from me in such random places. Sometimes, as I said, Archie Unplugged's internet came from a dream. And if something jumps out at me, then I might put it out there. I do have some fans, I would say, some famous wrestling fans. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but during the pandemic, when I was actually at probably one of my lowest points, I was lying on the floor of my child's room. All my stories seem to start with me trying to get my kids to sleep. But I was lying on the floor of my kid's room, and I got an email from Cameo. And I didn't order a Cameo. So I clicked on the thing, and there's Kevin Owens' face at me. And so what had happened? Yeah, there it is. So there's Kevin Owens' face looking at me, and basically someone had contacted Kevin to tell him the story of when I had went to his daughter's school. I didn't know that his daughter was on like suicide watch, is what Kevin says. 8-year-old on suicide watch. Just I can't get my head around that. But when I went into the school and I did my talk, and the fact that the message behind my talk was never give up, helped her kind of not to give up. And it still gets me to this day. The dad contacted Kevin to tell them the story, and the fact that I have got the credit for saving this girl's life. I don't like to say that. I don't like to have that kind of responsibility over a child's life, but that's what Kevin said. Anyway, so after that, I'd reached out to Kevin and I said, I would love to send you a copy of the book. So he gave me his address. I sent him a copy of the book out, and now, again, see, you're well prepared, aren't you? And Elodie is a huge fan now of Lucy's Blue Day, and it's one of her favorite books. And
Elodie, Kevin Steen's daughter, we should say.
Yeah, and they are. So him and I have had conversations about the book, and I think hopefully at one point we're going to meet up at some point, and we've got a nice rapport there now. The fact that he knows, and obviously we all know that Kevin Owens is huge on mental health as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's wonderful what you're doing. As I sort of get to the age where I'm looking for the proper teaching tools for my child, I think a resource like this is absolutely wonderful. At the moment, we're still working on maybe like the ABCs. We're still working on colors. We're still working on shapes and all that. But eventually, I mean, Lucy's Blue Day will be one of the go-tos, I'm sure, as I teach Oscar. Thank you so much for your time, Chris, being so generous with everything and being so open about your own stories. Where can people find the book? Where can people find more information about you and Lucy's Blue Day?
So we are quite active all over our socials and our website. So just lucysblueday.co.uk is where you can find all the information that you need. If you want to purchase the book, any profits that are done from my book sales go straight back into my tours, because and one thing that I should say is I don't charge schools for my visits.
Wow.
I do the visits are free for the school, as long as the condition is that the school lets the parents know that I'm coming, and if they want to buy a book, they can. So any profits from the book go straight back into the tour and the the school visits, and that's all my books. Even Archie Unplugs the Internet, and my autobiography is on there as well. All my books go right back into Lucy and Lucy's Blue Day. Social media wise, just look for Lucy's Blue Day in the search engine and you'll find me. Or Duke Writes Books on Twitter is my Twitter handle as well.
Fantastic. Jordan, Neal, thank you so much. Do you have any sort of closing thoughts and any plugs you guys want to give at this time?
Wai, you alluded to this early in the conversation. Adults, older people, we all can use this reminder daily, even that it is okay to feel whatever we are feeling in the moment. We often have very little control over these things. What we do have control over is how we respond to our own experience, whether it be thoughts, feelings, sensations, or otherwise. So first, I want to say thank you and much respect to you, Chris, for doing what you do, giving children more permission to express who they are and what's inside of them. And in the spirit of that, I'd like to offer that to anyone paying attention to this right now. Hopefully there's someone in your life that you feel some level of comfort with to just share your experience. And perhaps the Wellness Policy channel in Discord may be a decent option as well for you.
Neal?
Yeah, and I just want to say thanks to Chris, because he's been a tremendous guest and very open and about some of the rawer stuff that you personally have been through, Chris. And I think that's very much to your credit as well. And clearly a guy with tons of creativity, and I hope that it all continues and there's more dreams and more ideas come out. For me, just the Discord is probably as Jordan mentioned, where you could find me.
Postwrestling.com/discord is where you can find continue the conversation for the wellness policy if you guys like. Thank you so much again, Chris. Jordan and I will be back next month. Topic TBD.
I think we got a couple guests that I think are interested and potentially available, so we'll make it happen.
I would say stay tuned for a huge announcement. We also seem to Kevin is in the room. Hold up a hand if you'd actually like to speak, or if you're just waiting for us to go off air. Okay, Kevin, hello.
Oh, what's good? That was incredible. Yeah, that was moving. I'm not ready for my close up, as you can see, but what's good, guys? How are we doing?
Good.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't know if you wanted to actually talk on air, if you were just waiting till afterwards, but
Shit, I wasn't paying attention the last 45 seconds, but I just joined the room, so we're here. But,
Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, long-term storytelling. I'm on camera, so we're here.
Kevin,
Yeah.
you're live on Post Wrestling YouTube. What do you have to offer the world right now? Give us your wisdom, but no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. This topic, it was hitting home, and I was just doing the open mic night little quiet snaps the whole time because it was just insane. Like, my mind is running faster than a Will Ospreay Ricochet match right now, just trying to collect my thoughts, because like the childlike wonderment that I still exist, that I still deal with as a adult with autism, and threading back to being a child of divorce, like, you're so vulnerable to the world around you at such an age that these types of things, these types of interaction, these small moments can have such a profound impact well into adulthood, that we just need to uphold and keep our own strong, because that Post Wrestling Next in Line class of 2030, we gotta keep the youth happy and strong. That's all I gotta say.
Very well said, Kev. Very well said.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to all of you guys for listening. We will be back next month. Till next time, talk to you all later. Bye bye.